Well, let me start, or let me create new component, and in this data binding folder let me open the terminal over here, right? So if you can see, the end leaf is the data binding over here, right? It is the data binding. And let me create new component, ngGC. For creating new component, ngGC, right? Then name of the component output, so I can say op is the output. In the same directory, so I can say flat, right? Inline style and inline template. So I don't need to have separate style and the separate template. In a same TypeScript class, everything would be created. Hit the enter and observe the change over here. You'll find OP has been created with this structure. Right here itself, if your template is just of 4 to 5 lines, you don't need to create another HTML file. Just write over here. That's more precise, right? Now let me have little bit, what you can say, markup over here, page division, or say here dot container, and into the container I would be having dot row. Into the row I would be having, what you can say, dot colmd and the 12, right? I'm not looking at the responsiveness at all. That's your responsibility. You can do that thing right on your own. Fine. And here I would be having one input, not this, say input type is equals to, what you can say, button. Type is equals to what? Button. And value is nothing but op, something like this. Value is nothing but what? OP. And let me write this component into our, here I would be writing this component. Let me have the page division, and into the page division I can have our own component app OP. I think you are at least familiar with this thing now, right? What I am doing over here, how I am creating the hierarchy. So I created one component over here, then that component I have written over here, right? So yesterday we have seen your component can have one input variable over here. Add is the input variable of your component. Similarly, your component might emit some events. Your component, see, real timeness, on the click of this button, right? I want to emit, on the click of this button I want to emit the event outside the component. I want to emit the event outside the component. See what I would be doing? So on the click of this, I'm keeping very simple, on the click of this, right? And here I can say send emit. I would be calling the function that is nothing but the send emit, or simply omit the data, right? I would be calling one function which is nothing but the omit. Remember that this function would be resident of your output component, which is nothing but this. This function would be resident of your output component, means I need to write that omit over here, right? Well, it is going to omit some data outside the component. What I'm saying, it is going to omit some data outside the component, right? So yesterday we have seen every or few components can have, right? Few components can have this thing, right? Few components can have, what you can say, this I'm talking about. So this is your app IP, right? This is your app IP, and on the app IP you can see this thing, add. This is not standard HTML attribute or the property. So this is coming, right? This is coming from your custom component, assigning data to your custom component. Now, right, see in the app IP what we did is that I'll show you IP. So here is the address that is incoming from the outside world, if you can see this thing. So address, or if you can see this, right, it is the incoming. That's why you have attached at input annotation, right, or the decorator over here, and that incoming data you have printed in this, what you can say, component like this. In the handlebars, that is nothing but the string interpolation, you have printed that. Now, right, now what we are going to do is that app op is going to emit or output something. So here I would be having one special type of class called as event emitter. Event emitter from the Angular core package. Remember that I have imported these three things. If you have multiple, you can grow like this, right? You can grow something like this, right? See, import, first is this component, then on init, then event emitter, from which namespace? From the core namespace, right? From which namespace? From the Angular core namespace. It's a namespace, means set of all the classes, interfaces and all other things are here. Okay, so I would be needing event emitter. Similarly, I would be needing output, right? Similarly, I would be needing what? Output. See now what I would be doing. So here I am going to have, say, omitter of type event emitter, right? Omitter of type event emitter, and remember that this is a generic class, so it is saying me which type of data you are going to omit. So here you are saying I am omitting the string type of data. It's a generic. So tomorrow you will say this component can omit car type of data, this component can omit some another type of data. Presently this component is emitting, what you can say, string type of data, right? And I'm attaching this with at output here. At output means your OP component is having one variable which is going to be event binding. How? Let me show you. So here I'll go, and here omitter. Remember that omitter is a event emitter. Omitter is what? Event emitter, and it is going to emit the event of type string. It is going to emit the event of type what? String. So here you are going to see what is going to happen. Let me draw some picture, color paint over here, right? Or even in the augury I can explain you that. Look at the augury utility, right? Let me show you that. Can you see console, and what's happened to that? Error because of this, right? Because of this I'm getting the error, right? Let's remove that, and your app will work. If I go to the augury, into the augury it will show me the app component. App component contains your data binding component, and your data binding component is having two things. What you can see, IP component and the OP component, input component and output component. Which component is having? Data binding component. Let me click on the data binding component, right? OP component over here. You will find that OP component is something like this, right? So remember that your data binding component consists of input component and the output component, right? So what I am going to do is that, so this is my data binding component, right? So this data binding component is having input component and it is having output component, and this outside is the app component. This outside is of what? App component. Let me write that. This much is app component, here you can consider it as app component. This is the app component. This is your, what you can say, data binding component. This is a data binding component. This is the app component. This is a data binding component. This is the input component, say IP, and this is OP, IP component and OP component, right? So here you are going to give some data into the component, and this OP component is going to throw this data outside the component. So here you have attached, what you can say, at input, and here you have attached, what you can say, at output, at input and at output. Here you have attached at input because it is going to come to the component, and it is going outside the component, that's why it is at output. Now what I would be having, in the data binding component, I would be having one variable, you can say out data. I would be having one variable which is nothing but what? Out data, and to that out data I want to assign this data, and I want to print that into the data binding component. Means I can write simple handlebars to it, so it will be printing the data. See what I am trying to say? Your data binding component is having one variable. Here you can say private, sorry, not private, out data. It is of type string, that's fine, out data, right? And whenever the event over here, whenever event is going to be generated, right, you are going to call, you are going to bind it. See here, omitter, right? Omitter is going to call which function? You can say my data is the function. Means whenever you would be clicking, on this button, omit function is going to be called. When omit function is going to be called, actually event emitter is going to emit some data in this fashion. See, this dot omitter dot emit is the call for that, and from here you can pass any string. So what I would be doing is that new date dot toString, to what you can say string, I would be calling this thing. Means whenever you are going to click this button multiple times, you would be getting current date. So this output component is omitting, current date. That current date is going to be getting assigned to the out data from the function. Means what is happening? See here, or here there is one button. If you are going to click on this button, right, it is going to emit the event. That emitted event is going to be captured by one of the function from the data binding component, and that function is actually operating on out data. I'll show you. So here you are saying, see, if you write whenever app output or whenever output component is going to emit, right, please call my data from the data binding component, right? What I'm saying, whenever this output component is going to emit the data, kindly call my data function, from the data binding, which is the parent. If you see, it is the parent, data binding is the parent, right? Kindly call my data function inside this. So here I would be writing, what you can say, my data, right? And this my data is coming with one string value. You can say dt, and this string, this is an omitted string you would be getting over here. So what I'm going to do is that this dot out data is equals to dt. This dot out data is equals to what? dt. Remember that you are in a data binding component, right? So here anywhere you can call that out data. Out data is the call, is the variable. Yes, out data is the variable, right? So here I can say out data is something like this. See the flow, what's going to happen. So this component, once again I'll tell you, this component, on the click of the button, this component is going to emit this data, right? So in the data binding component there would be one callback. Whenever you call or whenever you click the button, event is going to be get emitted, and that emitted event is going to be captured by this event listener. This event listener is operating on the out data. If you see this thing, this call will not work. I'll show you, right? This will not work. So here you have OK. Where is the OK? So output data we have, that's fine. App OP is there, and in the app OP there is a value called as what you can say OP. It is not showing that OP value. Are we missing something? Subscribe, cannot read the property subscribe of undefined. Yes, because you just have written this, right? And you just have used over here, but you haven't initialized it. So directly means you are calling something on what? Undefined over here, and that's why you need to have, you can say this dot emitter is equals to new event emitter. Here you can say it is again of type string. It is again of type what? String. Now that function would be getting resolved, and can you see OP? Nothing will happen. See, on the click of OP, nothing will happen because something is remaining. Here you have emitted what you can say, here you have emitted the string value, right? Then that string value is going to be captured inside my data function, right? And to the my data function there is one variable. Here just you need to pass $event. Generated event is going to be pointed by the variable Angular's built-in variable, which is nothing but the $event, right? It is Angular's built-in variable. Whatever value is emitted by the event emitter, that value is stored in the $event. So you just need to call $event, and now you will see, can you see, you are getting the value. Remember that this much is another component. That component is publishing the data to the parent component, and parent is getting changed accordingly. See, outputting the values, input component to the component by means of @input, output, right, from the component. See here you are saying that I would be having, in another terms, I would be having one component whose name is app OP, and that app OP is emitting one event, and that custom event is nothing but the emitter. That custom event is nothing but the emitter. Whenever you will receive the event, what I'm saying, whenever you will receive the event, kindly call my data function over here. Kindly call this my data function over here, and my data is written in the data binding component over here, right? So this is how your, what you can say, this is how your output or event, custom event binding will work. So we have three things: click, mouse enter, mouse leave, and your custom event, which is nothing but what? Emitter. Right, so let me save it.